everybody. I am so excited to have you here for our third installment of our Parenting on the Go episodes. And I cannot wait to share with you our guest today. I have the pleasure of being joined today by Dr. Kimberly Vanderbilt. Dr. Vanderbilt is a professor of psychology at Cal State San Marcos, and I'm really eager to hear from her and for you all to hear from her because she's going to get to share with us all of the wonderful research that happens about play and really explain to us why play is so powerful and why it's so purposeful. So, Kimmy, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you too. So I know that, I have been talking a lot in sort of previous episodes that play is such a key component of a child's development. And I know that that's really a lot of the research that you do over at Cal State San Marcos is that you really think about play, but you think specifically about games and what games can sort of teach us about how a child develops. And so I would love if you could just sort of share what some of the insights are that you've learned about how play and specifically games can help to teach us about what kids are learning.
Yeah, sure. So we can actually learn a lot about what children know and what they understand by playing games with them, by watching their daily experiences and their actions. One of the pioneers of the field of child development, Jean Piaget, very famously based a lot of his theories just on his own observations of his own children. So that's a lot of how the field that I work in got started. It's just based on everyday observations of children.
Yeah.
He's this really famous, I just love this example, it's so dorky, but he has this really famous example of sort of recounting an episode that his daughter went through. So he talked about her sort of planning through something in her head and his observing that from the outside. So she had this like cup and she's little, so she takes both hands to use the cup and she's trying to take her cup to another room through a closed door. And she puts the cup down in front of the door and then she sort of looks at the cup and looks at the door and you can tell that she's mentally picturing the path of the door.
Yeah.
So she does this a couple times and then she picks up the cup and just moves it to the side and then opens the door. And he describes this essentially as an example of how you can just view what children understand about the world and what they know based on just watching how they interact in everyday situations.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
It's super dorky, but
no, it's not. It's great.
the everyday experiences that we have can really demonstrate what children know about the world, and just watching them, in their everyday environments. One really important thing to remember is that as humans, we aren't born with a lot of the abilities that we take for granted as adults. There's a lot of things that we sort of have to learn when we're really young. So really, really basic things like the fact that objects continue to exist even when you can't see them, or that other people might think or believe or know or want different things than we do. Those are really basic understandings, but children actually have to learn those things. And there's times when they don't have those understandings. So even these really simple concepts can really change the way that children interact with the world, the way they understand the world, and just how they interact with stuff.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I know that for me, as an educator, I have always found, child development so interesting, but it's really been so interesting for me as a parent to not just see sort of the academic development of a child, but really from those early stages, what are sort of those like key moments of recognition and understanding when they kind of blossom in front of you, I think is such a neat and wonderful thing to get to experience. And I'm wondering for, our other parents out there, are there ways that parents can kind of use things like games to help them sort of practice skills with their kids, or, what can parents do at home, I guess, to sort of utilize games to help them better understand where their child is developmentally or practice a certain skill? Do you have any tips or tricks like that?
Yeah, sure. So there's lots of different things that parents can to, I guess, observe their understanding, if that's a good way to put it, or to kind of, I don't want to say test them, but to kind of see what they know or see how they respond to things. Yeah. So even as researchers, we use a lot of things that look like games. When we want to learn about child development, we use things that look like games and look like fun little puzzles for children to understand how they learn. For example, one of my favorites is tests if children know what is in somebody else's head. So if they understand that someone cannot know something that they know.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a box that has a really specific kind of packaging, like a crayon box, and you fill it with something different. And you show the child the box and you say, okay, what do you think is inside this box? And they say crayons because it looks like a crayon box.
Right.
And then you open it up and you show them there's something different inside. Like it's always M&Ms in our research, and the kids get really excited about that. And then you close it up again and you say, okay, so your mom or your sister is about to come to the room. So they haven't seen inside this box. What will they think is inside the box before we open it for them?
Yeah.
And children who have an understanding of what other people might know or not know will say, oh my gosh, they're going to think that there's crayons in there, and they'll be fooled. But children who don't yet have that understanding, so typically children who are younger than about 4 years of age, will say, oh, they'll know that there's M&Ms in there.
Right.
Because they're separating what they know from what somebody else knows.
Right.
And a lot of these things that we're talking about, a lot of these basic understandings are things that develop sort of with age-related maturation. So children just sort of develop them over time, and there's not really a ton you can do to push them around. They vary very much in terms of when children develop them, but there are some cool situations where new experiences can actually give children sort of new understandings. So a really, I don't know, it's dorky, but a really dorky, but really interesting example of this is a study that was done. It's called the Sticky Mittens study, and it's done with young infants. So initially, children, they don't have the ability to pick up objects. So at 3 months, for example, infants will swipe at objects. So they can't yet like have the physical muscle ability to actually like, pick something up. They just swipe at them. So if you give these infants that can't yet pick up something the ability to pick them up, then it sort of changes the way they interact with the world. So what they do is they take these little mittens and they put Velcro on the mittens, and they put the other end of the Velcro on toys, so that when infants swipe at them, it actually like sticks on their time they've ever picked up something in their lives, and they're just fascinated by this. And when infants have that first experience, it leads to all these gains in other areas. So things like they become more interested in objects. They have more reaching behavior. They become more interested in other people, which is something that's totally unrelated, but it increases their understanding and their interest in these other areas. So we do see in child development that a lot of individual abilities are related to each other, and development in one area can lead to development in another area.
That definitely makes sense. You know, I'm thinking even of my little one, she's 2.5. And so I'm thinking of even, you know, what you were just describing about the crayon box and what do you see in it, and how, you know, kiddos of a certain age, they can anticipate what somebody else might think. And I think one of the things that's so interesting, that makes me think about just even sort of things as parents that we take as granted and that we think are kind of funny or cute when they happen. Like for me, my daughter has started to tell jokes a little bit, but I feel like even something like telling a joke is actually a sign of probably like a developmental milestone where she's actually able to sort of think about, oh, what is mom going to think is funny, or what is unusual, and that's why it's funny to laugh at. And so that's so interesting just to think, I guess, about how, you know, what you're saying in terms of one small kind of thing, like picking up an object or noticing something in a box or not in a box, can actually be so much more significant to showcase what kids are actually thinking about the world around them and the people around them. And that's really, that I think is so wonderful to think about in terms of a parent, that, you know, anything that your kiddo is doing during the day, you don't need a lot to kind of observe what you're doing with them, but they, you know, everyday interactions can be really powerful for showcasing what they're actually learning. Are there any like games or, you know, sort of telltale things that are better for some age groups over another? Like, are there some things that just work better for certain kiddos than other kiddos?
It really just depends on the kinds of skills and the kinds of abilities that children are learning at given ages. So children learn different things at different times, just naturally. And it's sometimes easy to kind of take the same game and make it applicable to different age groups. So you can, you know, you can take something like different shapes, and you can have different conversations about them or highlight different things about them with children of different ages to be able to, you know, to highlight the skills that are most relevant to them. And that's really what can be interesting for young children, is really aligning what we're doing with them for different ages.
That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense just from like an educational standpoint too. You know, there's things that we do at the museum that are better geared towards one age group versus another, but they might use the same material. So that definitely makes sense in terms of like where kids are developmentally. if parents are sort of looking for resources or things that they might be able to do at home with their own kiddos, just if, they're curious about where is my child developmentally, if they have no background in child development, are there resources out there? Where could parents go to sort of learn more about what they might be able to do at home to sort of, if they want to uncover where their kids are developmentally or what they're learning, where could they go? What are some resources that are available?
Yeah, sure. So we can even talk about some right now. I can tell you about a couple more that parents can try at home with their kids if they have kiddos that are at the right age.
That would be perfect.
And then there's lots of different things if you know where to look. My lab actually has an Instagram right now. We have an Instagram account where a lot of my students are working on these videos where they actually outline some of these games for parents and talk about the science behind them, talk about what they show, so that parents can try them at home. I have to admit that we are not video editors or any kind of video producers at all. But my students have been working really hard on these, and they're examples of actual tasks that we use in science.
Okay.
Parents can, they're basic games, and parents can try them at home. I'll give you guys just one quick example. So,
yeah, that would be great.
So this is a really classic task called the Rouge Task. Rouge like women's makeup, and it measures their self-understanding. So how well children understand that they're a thing that exists in the world and they're separate from other people and other things in the world. And that's a really basic kind of understanding that leads to understanding other things, like that people can think different things from you. You have to understand that you're separate from them first. So it's a really basic understanding. Children typically develop it around 18 months.
Okay.
So if you have a kiddo who's around 18 months of age, you can try this at home. Or younger or older, and you can kind of see how they do.
Sure.
But that's usually the tipping point for this, 18 to 24 months. Okay, so you try this Rouge Task at home. What you do is you have to very sneakily sort of put something on the infant's face. So that's why it's called the Rouge Task. Originally it was women's makeup, so you take like some lipstick and you smear it on their nose. And you sort of smear it on their face. And then you put them in front of a mirror. And you look to see if the infant recognizes that the makeup is on their face. So when they look in the mirror, do they recognize? So normally what will happen is they'll see the reflection in the mirror. And children who don't yet have understanding will kind of look at the mirror and like, haha, look at that kid in the mirror that has that stuff on their face. They haven't made the connection to themselves yet. And children that do have this understanding will look in the mirror, see the reflection, and then, oh my gosh, and they'll touch their own face. And that is an example of children making this connection between the reflection and their self.
So interesting.
So it's just a cute, really simple thing that you can try at home. It tells you something really interesting. But it doesn't require any, weird scientific anything. It just sort of demonstrates through what children do naturally.
I love that. And I love that it's just like simple everyday objects at home that you can use. Like you said, it's not like you need test tubes or goggles or anything like that to sort of learn about where kids are. There's these really easy things that you can kind of do with them at your house anytime, just to sort of figure out what they're learning. And I think that one of the things I have found so interesting about having a really young child is just how quickly they change and develop. And so I imagine it's also just really interesting to do some of these games, like, every couple weeks with the same kiddo or every month, just to sort of see where they might change and when that change happens and would probably just be so interesting to notice. So I'm definitely going to have to look at your guys' Instagram so I can get a couple ideas of things that I can play around with at home with my own little one. So we'll make sure that we put that in the comments for everyone too. But I really appreciate you joining us today, Kimmy. Thank you so much for talking about your research and play. And thank you all for joining us. I've had so much fun learning with you all about purposeful play, and I hope you have too. I hope you'll give me a round of applause and thanking Dr. Vanderbilt for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you again next time for our next episode of Parenting on the Go.
Thanks so much for having me.